Alien girl smiled at the human boy in class until the galaxy learned the truth. HFY sci-fi. The Orion Interstellar Academy floated in orbit around a blue gas giant, its silver towers shining against the endless darkness of space. It was one of the most prestigious schools in the entire galaxy. Young students from dozens of advanced civilizations came here to study diplomacy, science, and leadership. Inside its classrooms sat future rulers, commanders, scientists, and explorers. Among all of them, there was one student who did not seem to belong. His name was Ethan Ward. Ethan was the only human in the academy. Most alien civilizations did not think highly of humans. To them, Earth was a young world with little technology compared to the great empires of the galaxy. Humans were often described as fragile, emotional, and unpredictable. Many students ignored Ethan completely. Some whispered about him when he walked past. Others simply saw him as a curiosity. Ethan had grown used to it. He sat quietly in the back of the classroom during xenobiology studies, listening carefully as Professor Talleyrand spoke. The professor was a tall, insect-like being with 6 thin arms and glowing blue eyes. Understanding each other's biology, Professor Talleyrand said calmly, is the first step toward peace in the galaxy. The classroom was filled with many different species. A tall reptilian student from the Crax Dominion sat near the front. 2 floating crystalline beings hovered quietly beside the window. A furry student from the Orlani systems tapped notes on a glowing tablet. And then there was Lyra Vekera. Everyone knew her name. Lyra came from the powerful Vekera Dominion, one of the oldest and most feared civilizations in the galaxy. Her species was tall and elegant, with pale silver skin and glowing violet eyes. Their expressions were very different from humans. Among the Vekera, a smile was not a sign of happiness. It was a signal of dominance before a hunt. Most students avoided looking directly at Lyra. But today, Lyra was not looking at them. She was looking at Ethan. Ethan, meanwhile, was trying to focus on a lesson. Professor Talleyrand projected a hologram of several alien nervous systems into the center of the room. As you can see, the professor explained, different species process information at very different speeds. The hologram shifted, showing the neural patterns of multiple civilizations. Some species rely heavily on instinct. Others rely on complex logical processing. The balance between the two shapes culture and behavior. Ethan wrote notes carefully in his digital notebook. He liked learning about alien biology. It helped him understand the strange world he now lived in. Suddenly, the room grew quieter. Several students had stopped paying attention to the professor. Instead, they were staring toward the middle row of seats. Lyra Vekera was smiling, and she was smiling directly at Ethan. A cold feeling spread through the room. Students whispered nervously. Is she challenging him? One Orlani student muttered. That's a hunting signal, another whispered. The crack student turned his head slowly. Even Professor Talleyrand paused mid-sentence. Everyone knew what a Vekera smile meant, except Ethan. He looked up from his notes, noticing the sudden silence. For a moment, he didn't understand why everyone was staring at him. Then he saw Lyra. She was watching him with calm violet eyes, and she was smiling. Ethan blinked. Hi, he said quietly. A few students gasped. To them, it looked like a small prey animal greeting a predator. But Ethan simply thought she was being friendly. Lyra did not respond. Her smile slowly faded, but she continued studying him with intense focus. Inside her mind, something was very wrong. Vekera senses were far more advanced than those of most species. They could detect subtle neural signals from other intelligent beings. It was a skill that had helped their civilization survive for thousands of years. When Lyra had first looked at Ethan earlier that morning, she noticed something unusual. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But now she was certain. The human's brain activity felt strange. It was far stronger than it should be. Human neural patterns were well documented across the galactic databases. They were considered average at best. But Ethan's mind felt different. It was like standing near a quiet machine that was hiding enormous power. Lyra narrowed her eyes slightly. She focused her senses again. The signal was still there, deep within Ethan's mind, hidden beneath normal brain activity. Something powerful was sleeping. It reminded her of an ancient energy reading she had only seen once before in historical records. Lyra's smile had not been a threat. It had been surprise. Across the room, Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Why is everyone staring at me?" he whispered to the Orlani student sitting beside him. The furry alien shrugged nervously. "I think the Vaycara girl just marked you." "Marked me for what?" The Orlani student hesitated. "Hunting." Ethan stared at him. "What?" Before the conversation could continue, Professor Tallerin cleared his throat loudly. "Class," the professor said, regaining control of the room. "Let us return to the lesson." The hologram shifted again, but many students were still watching Ethan and Lyra carefully. Lyra leaned slightly back in her seat. Her mind was racing. If her senses were correct, the human boy in this classroom was hiding something impossible. No known human should produce neural patterns like this. It was too organized, too powerful, too controlled. Her species had a name for minds like that, but the term had not been used in over 12,000 years. Lyra told herself she must be mistaken. Still, she kept watching Ethan. Ethan returned to writing notes. He tried to ignore the strange looks around him. He had experienced similar situations before. Being the only human at a galactic academy was not easy. Sometimes people treated him like a joke. Sometimes they treated him like a fragile experiment. But today felt different. Even he could sense the tension in the air. After another 15 minutes, the class finally ended. A soft chime echoed through the room. Students began packing their equipment. Some hurried toward the exits. Others stayed behind, whispering about what had happened. Ethan closed his notebook and stood up. He slung his bag over his shoulder and started walking toward the door. As he passed Lyra's desk, he glanced at her again. She was still watching him. This time, she did not smile. Instead, she spoke softly. "Human?" Ethan stopped. "Yeah." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "What is your name?" "Ethan." She studied him for another moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I see." Ethan waited for her to say more, but she didn't. After a few seconds of awkward silence, Ethan shrugged and continued walking toward the hallway. Lyra watched him leave the room. Her senses followed the fading signal of his mind. It was still there, still hidden, still powerful. Far across the galaxy, inside a silent monitoring station buried deep within Vaycara space, ancient systems suddenly activated. For 12,000 years they had remained quiet, but now alarms began flashing across the dark control room. A single message appeared on the central screen. Anomalous cognitive signature detected. Location, Orion Interstellar Academy. Classification, unknown. Deep within the ancient system's archives, an old protocol awakened. The file had only been used once in recorded history. Its title appeared slowly on the screen. Possible star mind event. Back at the academy, Ethan stepped into the busy hallway, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. Students walked past him. Some glanced at him nervously. Others quickly looked away. Behind him, Lyra remained seated. Her violet eyes were filled with quiet curiosity. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt something new. Not dominance, not rivalry, but interest. Because the human boy everyone ignored might be something far more important than anyone realized. And if Lyra was right, the next morning at Orion Interstellar Academy felt different. News traveled very fast in the school, filled with students from many star systems. By the time the first class of the day began, almost everyone had heard about what happened yesterday. The story spread in many versions. Some students said Lyra Vaycara had challenged a human. Others said she had marked him as prey. A few even claimed the human had somehow challenged her back, which many believed was impossible. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. Everyone was now watching Ethan Ward. Ethan walked to the long academy hallway, carrying his bag. Tall glass windows showed the giant blue gas planet outside. Light from the distant sun reflected across the metal floor. Normally, students ignored him, but today many eyes followed him as he passed. Two cracked students whispered to each other. "That's a human." The one Lyra smiled at. "Yes." They quickly moved aside as Ethan walked by. Ethan noticed the strange looks, but he tried to ignore them. He had learned something important since arriving at the academy. If you acted nervous, people notice you more. So Ethan simply kept walking calmly. Inside, however, he was confused. Why was everyone staring? Yesterday's strange moment with Lyra kept replaying in his mind. He still did not understand why the class had become so quiet. To him, it had only looked like someone smiling. Humans smiled all the time, but apparently in the galaxy, things were not always that simple. Meanwhile, on the other side of the academy, Lyra Vaquera stood near a tall observation window. She was not watching the planet outside. She was watching Ethan from across the hallway, hidden among the crowd of students. Her violet eyes followed his movement carefully. The signal was still there. The strange neural energy she had sensed yesterday was not gone. If anything, it felt clearer now. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment and focused her senses again. Vaquera minds were trained from childhood to read subtle patterns in other intelligent beings. It helped them understand threats and intentions. But what she sensed from Ethan was not emotion. It was structure. His brain activity was organized in ways that made no sense for a normal human. It was like looking at a puzzle that had been carefully hidden under something ordinary. Lyra opened her eyes again. "Impossible," she whispered quietly. Just then a voice spoke behind her. "You are staring again." Lyra turned. A tall student with dark green scales stood nearby. His name was Raxer, a cadet from the Crax Dominion. Raxer was known for his combat skills and confidence. He crossed his arms and looked toward Ethan. "So that is a human," Raxer said. Lyra said nothing. Raxer chuckled softly. "I heard. He thinks your smile was friendly." Lyra's expression remained calm. "Humans interpret facial signals differently," she replied. Raxer looked amused. "Maybe I should test him in combat training later." Lyra turned toward him slowly. Her voice remained quiet but firm. "That would be unwise." Raxer raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Lyra paused. For a moment she considered telling him the truth, but even she did not fully understand what she was sensing yet. So she simply said, "Because you may be surprised." Raxer laughed loudly. "A human surprising me?" He shook his head and walked away. Lyra watched him go. For the first time, she felt slightly worried, because Raxer did not know what she knew. Later that afternoon, the Academy's combat simulation hall opened for training exercises. The room was enormous, filled with holographic projectors that could create realistic battle environments. Students gathered around the central arena. Raxer stood confidently in the middle. He looked around the room and spotted Ethan near the entrance. "There you are, human!" Raxer called loudly. Many students turned to watch. Ethan froze for a moment. "Me?" Raxer grinned. "Yes. Come, let us see how humans fight." A few students laughed. Ethan scratched the back of his head. "I'm not really a fighter." "Even better," Raxer said. "This will be quick." The crowd moved slightly closer. Some were curious. Others simply expected to see the human lose quickly. Ethan sighed quietly. He walked into the arena. High above, the simulation system activated. A holographic training environment appeared around them. Rocky terrain formed across the floor. Professor Talrin's voice echoed through the room. "Training exercise. Non-lethal settings active." Raxer stretched his arms confidently. Ethan stood across from him, looking slightly uncomfortable. Lyra watched from the side of the arena. Her eyes were focused intensely. "Begin!" the system announced. Raxer moved first. He rushed forward with impressive speed. The Crack species was known for strong muscles and fast reflexes. Many expected the match to end in seconds. But something unexpected happened. At the last moment, Ethan stepped slightly to the side. Raxer's strike missed completely. The crowd murmured. Raxer turned quickly and attacked again. This time Ethan ducked. Again the attack missed. The movements were small, simple, but perfectly timed. Raxer frowned. He attacked a third time. Ethan stepped back calmly. Raxer lost his balance slightly and stumbled forward. The crowd gasped. Even Ethan looked surprised. "Sorry," Ethan said quickly. "Are you okay?" Raxer's face turned darker with frustration. "You are dodging." "I'm trying not to get hit." Ethan replied honestly. Raxor charged again. But now the pattern was clear. Every attack missed. Every movement Ethan made seemed perfectly timed. After a few minutes, Raxor stopped. He was breathing heavily. Ethan was barely tired. The room was silent. Finally, Raxor stepped back. The training system ended the match. Professor Tallerin spoke again. Exercise complete. Students whispered loudly now. Did the human just win? He didn't even attack. How did he move like that? Ethan scratched his head again. I was mostly trying to stay out of the way. Raxor looked confused. He was one of the Academy's strongest fighters. Yet he had not landed a single strike. From the side of the arena, Lyra watched quietly. Her suspicion was growing stronger. Ethan had not moved randomly. Every step had been efficient. Every dodge perfectly calculated. It was exactly the kind of movement someone would make if they could predict actions seconds before they happened. Lyra felt a chill run through her mind, because that was one of the abilities described in the ancient records. Records about something that should not exist anymore. Later that evening, far away in Vacera Dominion space, a secret communication arrived at Lyra's personal terminal. The message was encrypted with high-level authority codes. Lyra opened it carefully. The screen displayed a single sentence. Confirmed neural anomaly observed at Orion Academy. Her eyes narrowed. Below the message was another line. Dominion intelligence is monitoring the situation. Continue observation. Lyra stared at the message for several seconds. That meant the ancient monitoring system had detected the signal too, which meant this was no mistake. Somewhere in the galaxy, old warnings were beginning to wake up. Back at the Academy, Ethan sat alone in the cafeteria, eating quietly. He still looked like a normal human student. He had no idea that governments across the stars were beginning to notice him. Across the room, Lyra watched him carefully. Her mind repeated the same question again and again. What are you, human? Because the more she observed him, the more she realized something terrifying. Ethan Ward might not just be unusual. He might be something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of years. And if that was true, the Orion Interstellar Academy was quieter than usual that evening. Most students had already returned to their dormitories after the long day of classes and training. The bright hallways were now calm, lit by soft blue lights along the walls. But one student was still walking through the academy corridors. Lyra Vacera. Her steps were slow and careful. Her mind was filled with questions that refused to leave her alone. For 2 days she had watched the human boy, and everything she saw only made the mystery deeper. Ethan Ward moved like a normal human most of the time. He spoke politely. He attended classes quietly. He did not act powerful or important. But sometimes there were moments where his actions were too fast, too precise, too perfectly timed. Like during the combat training with Raxor, Lyra stopped near a tall window that overlooked the academy gardens below. The gardens were calm, filled with glowing plants from many different worlds. And there, sitting on a stone bench, was Ethan. He was alone. He seemed relaxed, looking up at the stars above the academy's energy shield. Lyra watched him for several seconds. Then she made a decision. She walked down the stairs toward the garden. The night air inside the shield was cool and quiet. The artificial sky showed thousands of distant stars. Ethan heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Lyra approaching. For a moment, he looked slightly nervous. Hi again, Ethan said. Lyra stopped a few steps away from him. For several seconds, she said nothing. Her violet eyes studied him carefully. Finally, she spoke. Ethan Ward. Ethan nodded. Yeah, you are not a normal human. Ethan froze. The sentence was simple, but it hit him like cold water. He forced a small laugh. I try my best. Lyra did not smile. You predicted Raxor's attacks. I just dodged. You moved before he moved. Ethan looked away toward the stars. Maybe he was just slow. Lyra stepped closer. No. Her voice was calm but certain. I have studied hundreds of species. Your reaction speed was not random. She paused. It was calculated. Ethan said nothing. The garden became very quiet. Finally, Lyra spoke again. I can sense your neural patterns. Ethan's eyes slowly returned to her. and they are wrong. Ethan looked confused. Wrong. They are too organized, too powerful. She took another step closer. My species has records of minds like yours. Ethan's face slowly changed. The relaxed expression disappeared. For the first time, Lyra saw real tension in his eyes. Records? Ethan asked quietly. Lyra nodded. A classification that has not appeared in 12,000 years. Ethan stood up slowly from a bench. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan sighed. He rubbed his forehead with one hand. I was hoping no one here could notice. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. You admit it. Ethan looked at her seriously now. You already know something is strange. He looked around the quiet garden. No one else was nearby. Then he spoke quietly. How much do you know? Lyra answered honestly. Only a name from ancient archives. She hesitated. Star mind. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he looked tired. Yeah, he said softly. I was afraid of that. Lyra's heart beat slightly faster. So it is real. Ethan sat back down on the bench. Kind of. Lyra remained standing. She waited. Ethan looked up at the stars again. Humans didn't always live only on Earth. He began slowly. Lyra listened carefully. A long time ago, Ethan continued, our explorers went deeper into space than anyone expected. Further than the mapped galaxy. Further than most civilizations ever travel. Lyra leaned slightly forward. And there they found something. Ethan nodded. Something ancient. Older than most stars. He paused. No one knows exactly what it was. Some people called it a machine. Some called it a living intelligence. But whatever it was, it studied humanity. Lyra's mind raced. And then, she asked quietly. Ethan's voice became softer. It changed us. Lyra's eyes widened. Changed how? It unlocked something in the human brain. Ethan tapped the side of his head. Humans only use a small part of our brain, naturally. But that thing, it removed the limits. Lyra's breathing slowed. And the result? Ethan looked down at his hands. At first it seemed amazing. Human scientists solved problems that had confused entire civilizations. New technologies appeared almost overnight. Space travel became faster. Diseases disappeared. He paused again. But then the problem started. Lyra already knew what he was going to say. Power, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Human minds became too powerful. Some people could predict events before they happened. Some could understand complex systems instantly. And some... He hesitated. Some could control machines just by thinking. Lyra felt a chill move through her mind. Star minds, she said quietly. Ethan nodded again. That's what the galaxy called them. What happened next? Lyra asked. Ethan sighed. Fear. The galaxy panicked. Some empires tried to destroy humanity before we became too powerful. But humans were already changing too fast. Wars started. Lyra said nothing. She had studied galactic history. There was a mysterious period of chaos thousands of years ago. Most records about it were incomplete. Now she understood why. So what did humanity do? She asked. Ethan looked back at the stars. We stopped ourselves. Lyra blinked. You stopped. Ethan nodded. Human leaders realized what was happening. If star minds continued appearing, humanity would eventually dominate the galaxy. And that kind of power always leads to destruction. So scientists created neurolimiters. Devices placed in human DNA. They keep most of our brain locked. Lyra slowly understood. So modern humans are restricted. Exactly. Ethan smiled slightly. Most humans today only access a small part of what our brains could actually do. Lyra's voice became very quiet. But sometimes the limiter fails. Ethan looked at her. Yeah, very rarely. Lyra finished the thought, and a star mind is born. Ethan gave a small nod. The garden became silent again. Lyra stared at him with new understanding. You are one of them. Ethan did not deny it. I think so. Lyra slowly sat down on the other side of the bench. For a moment, she simply looked at him. You could become very powerful. Ethan shrugged slightly. Maybe. Does your government know? Ethan shook his head quickly. No, and I want to keep it that way. Lyra looked confused. Why? Ethan smiled softly. Because power makes people afraid. He looked toward the academy buildings. I came here to learn, to live a normal life. Lyra thought about that. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her all day. If you were so powerful, why didn't you defeat Raxer? Ethan laughed quietly. Because I don't want to hurt anyone. He looked back at the stars again. My parents always told me something. Lyra waited. Ethan spoke slowly. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Lyra studied him carefully. For the first time, she felt something unexpected. Respect. Because the human sitting beside her might one day become one of the most powerful minds in the galaxy. Yet he was choosing to live quietly, but far away in deep space. Ancient sensors were still watching, and powerful civilizations were beginning to ask questions. Questions that might soon reach the Orion Interstellar Academy. And when that happened, the next 3 days at Orion Interstellar Academy passed quietly, at least on the surface. Students continued attending classes. Training simulations continued in the combat halls. Professors gave lectures about diplomacy, science, and interstellar law. Everything looked normal, but behind the calm routine, something else was happening. Far beyond the academy, powerful eyes were watching. Deep inside Vacera Dominion space, an ancient monitoring station continued analyzing the strange signal it had detected days earlier. Thousands of silent machines worked together, studying the neural pattern connected to one name, Ethan Ward. The results were becoming clearer with every hour, and they were alarming. Inside a dark control chamber, several Dominion intelligence officers stood around a large holographic screen. A tall Vacera commander studied the data carefully. One of the analysts spoke. The neural pattern matches the ancient records. The commander's violet eyes narrowed. Confirmation level? 92%. The room became silent. The commander slowly spoke the words that no one in the Dominion had expected to hear again. Star Mind. For thousands of years, the term had existed only in history archives. The last time one appeared, entire civilizations had nearly collapsed. The commander folded his arms. Location? Orion Interstellar Academy. Species? Human. The commander remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he gave an order. Prepare a retrieval team. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Ethan had no idea any of this was happening. He was sitting in the library, reading a digital textbook about alien star systems. The large room was filled with quiet students studying at glowing desks. Across the table from him sat Lyra. She had not told anyone about their conversation in the garden, not even her own people. She was still thinking about what Ethan had told her. A star mind, an awakened human brain capable of incredible calculations. The idea was both fascinating and frightening. Lyra watched Ethan quietly while he read. To everyone else in the room, he looked completely normal, just another student studying. But Lyra knew the truth now. Inside his mind was a power that had once changed the galaxy. Suddenly, Ethan looked up. "Why are you staring again?" he asked. Lyra blinked. "I am observing." Ethan smiled slightly. "That sounds suspicious." Lyra tilted her head. "You are suspicious." Ethan laughed quietly. "I guess that's fair." They returned to studying. But something strange happened. Ethan suddenly looked toward the library entrance. Lyra noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan frowned slightly. "I'm not sure." "Did you hear something?" "No." "Then what?" Ethan hesitated. "It just feels like something is about to happen." Lyra felt a chill, because that was exactly the kind of instinct described in the ancient records. Star minds sometimes sense patterns before events occurred. Before Lyra could respond, the library doors suddenly opened. 3 tall figures walked inside. They were clearly not students. They wore dark armor with a symbol of the Vacera Dominion. The entire library went silent. Students looked up in surprise. Official Dominion agents rarely visited the academy. The agents scanned the room. Their leader spoke calmly. "Lyra Vacera." Lyra slowly stood up. "Yes. We are here under Dominion authority." Several students exchanged nervous looks. The leader continued, "We require the human student Ethan Ward." The room became completely silent. Ethan slowly closed his textbook. Lyra looked shocked. "How did you—" The agent raised his hand. "That information is classified." Ethan stood up calmly. "What do you want with me?" he asked. The agent answered directly, "You are coming with us." Several students whispered nervously. Lyra stepped forward. "This is a diplomatic academy. You cannot simply remove a student." The agent looked at her. "Our orders come from the Dominion High Council." Ethan quietly observed the agents. Inside his mind, something strange was happening. Patterns were forming, movements, probabilities, possible outcomes. His brain was calculating everything. He could see the small shifts in the agent's posture, the location of security cameras, the distance to the exits. Dozens of possibilities appeared in his mind, but Ethan took a deep breath and ignored them. He had promised himself something. He would not use his abilities unless absolutely necessary. The lead agent stepped forward. "Human, you will come peacefully." Ethan looked at Lyra. She looked worried. Then he looked back at the agent. "Why?" The agent answered simply, "Because your existence is a potential threat to galactic stability." Murmurs spread through the room. "Threat?" Ethan sighed quietly. "I'm just a student." "You are more than that," the agent replied. For a moment, the tension in the room felt heavy. Then something unexpected happened. The academy's main security doors suddenly closed. Red lights appeared along the ceiling. A calm, robotic voice echoed through the building. "Unauthorized extraction attempt detected." Several academy security officers entered the library. Their leader stepped forward. "This is a neutral education facility," she said firmly. "No government may remove students without approval." The Dominion agent looked annoyed. "This matter concerns galactic security." The security leader replied calmly, "Then you may file the proper diplomatic requests." The standoff lasted several long seconds. Students watched nervously. Finally, the Dominion agent spoke. "This conversation is not finished." He looked directly at Ethan. "We will return." Then the agents turned and walked out of the library. The tension slowly faded. Students began whispering loudly. What was that about? Why do they want the human? Ethan sat back down slowly. Lyra looked at him carefully. "You sensed them before they arrived." Ethan nodded slightly. "Yeah, that is star mind instinct." Ethan gave a small shrug. "Probably." Lyra watched him for another moment. Then she smiled again. But this time, the smile meant something very different. It was not dominance. It was respect. Because Ethan had just faced trained Dominion agents. And he had remained calm the entire time. Not because he was weak, but because he was choosing not to use his power. Lyra leaned back in her chair. "You realize something," she said. "What?" "Your secret will not stay hidden much longer." Ethan smiled slightly. "I figured." Lyra looked around the busy library. The galaxy still believed humans were weak, primitive, unimportant. But that belief was beginning to change. Because somewhere inside the Orion Interstellar Academy, a quiet human student had already proven something important. Humanity had never truly been weak. They had simply chosen to hold themselves back. And if even one human mind could cause this much attention, then the galaxy might soon start asking a new question. What would happen